Groups. When a group is organized, its members have certain conditions put before them. In the first place, conditions general to all members, and secondly, individual conditions applicable to individual members. General conditions at the beginning of the work are usually of the following kind. First of all, it is explained to everyone in a group that they must keep secret everything they hear or learn in the work, and not only while they are members of it, but forever afterwards. This is an indispensable condition whose idea should be made clear from the very onset. In other words, it should be clear that in this there is no attempt to make a secret of what is not essentially a secret, neither is there any intention to deliberately deprive them of the right to exchange views with those near to them, or with their friends. The idea of this restriction consists of the fact that they are unable to transmit correctly what is said in groups. They very soon begin to learn from their own personal experience how much effort, how much time, and how much explaining is necessary in order to grasp what is said in the work. It should become clear to them that they are unable to give their friends a right idea of what they have learned themselves. At the same time, they begin to understand that by giving their friends wrong ideas, they shut them off from the possibility of approaching the work at any time, or of understanding anything in connection with the work. To say nothing of the fact that in this way they are creating many difficulties and perhaps even unpleasantries for themselves in the future. If someone, in spite of this, tries to transmit what is learned in groups to their friends, then they will very quickly be convinced that attempts to do so will give entirely unexpected and undesirable results. Either people begin to argue with them, without wanting to listen, expect someone to validate their theories, or they misinterpret everything they are told and attach an entirely different meaning to whatever has been explained. In seeing this and understanding the futility of such attempts, one begins to see one aspect of this restriction. The other, and no less important side, consists of the fact that it is very difficult for someone to keep silent about things that interest them. They would like to speak about this to everyone with whom they are accustomed to share thoughts, as it's referred to. This is the most mechanical of all desires, and in this case silence is the most difficult abstinence of all. However, if someone understands this, or at least if they follow the rule, then it will constitute for them the best exercise possible in self-remembering and the development of self-will. Only one who can be silent when it is necessary to do so can become master of themselves. However, for many it is difficult to reconcile the thought that one of their chief characteristics consists of undue talkativeness, particularly for people who are accustomed to regard themselves as serious or sound individuals. Perhaps for one who regards themselves as the silent type, that are fond of solitude and reflection. It is for this very reason that the stipulation is important. In remembering this and in carrying it out, a person begins to see sides of themselves that they might never have noticed before. The next demand made upon members of a group is that they must tell the teacher of the group the whole truth. This must also be clearly and properly understood, as people do not realize what a prominent place in their lives is occupied by lying, even if only the suppression of truth. Individuals are unable to be sincere either with themselves or with others, and so cannot understand that to learn to be sincere when it is necessary is one of the most difficult things on earth. They imagine that to speak or not to speak the truth, to be or not to be sincere depends upon them. Therefore they have to learn this, and learn initially with regard to the teacher of the work. Telling the teacher a deliberate lie, or being insincere and suppressing something will make their presence in the group useless, and is even worse than being rude or uncivil to them in their presence. The next demand made is that one must remember why they came to the group. We come to learn and to work on ourselves, to learn and to work not as we understand it, but as we are told to do so. If once we are in the group, we begin to feel or to express mistrust towards the teacher, to criticize their actions or feel that we understand better how the group should be conducted. In particular, to show a lack of external considering with regard to the teacher, a lack of respect for them, asperity, impatience or a tendency to argue, then this immediately puts an end to the possibility of any work. For work is possible only as long as people remember that they have come to learn, and not to teach. If someone begins to distrust the teacher, then the teacher becomes unnecessary for them, and they in turn become unnecessary to the teacher. In this event it is better for them to go and look for another teacher, or try to work without one. This will do them no good but will nonetheless do less harm than lying, suppression, resistance or the mistrust of a teacher. In addition to these fundamental demands, it is of course presumed that all members of the group must work. If they frequent the group and do no work but simply imagine they are working, if they regard as work simply their attendance in the group, or as often happens, if they look upon their presence in the group as a pastime, if they make pleasant acquaintances and so on, then their participation will likely become utterly useless. The sooner they are sent away or leave of their own accord, the better it will be for them, and for the others. These fundamental demands provide the material for rules that are obligatory for all members of a group. In the first place, rules help everyone who wants to work to avoid everything that may hinder them, or that do harm to this work. Importantly, they help us to remember ourselves. It often happens at the beginning of the work that members of the group do not like some or other rules. They even ask if it is not possible to work without rules. Rules to them seem an unnecessary constraint upon their freedom, or a tiresome formality. To be reminded about rules seems to them to be ill will or dissatisfaction on the part of the teacher. In reality, rules are the principal and primary assistance that they get from the work. It stands to reason that rules do not pursue the object of affording amusement or satisfaction, of perhaps making things easier for us. Rules pursue a definite aim, which is to make people behave as they would behave if they remembered themselves, and realized how they ought to behave with regard to others outside the work, to people in the work and to the teacher. If they remember themselves and realize this, then rules would not be necessary for them. However, they are unable to remember themselves and understand this at the very beginning of the work, hence rules become indispensable. Rules can never be easy, pleasant or comfortable, and on the contrary they ought to be difficult, unpleasant and uncomfortable, otherwise they will not serve their purpose. Rules are the alarm clocks that wake the sleeping individual. However, one, opening their eyes for a second, grows indignant with the alarm clock and asks, "Can one not awaken without alarm clocks?" Aside from the general rules, there are individual conditions given to each person separately, that are generally connected with their very own chief fault or chief feature. This requires some explanation. Every person has a certain feature in their character that is central. It is like an axle around which all of their false personality revolves. Everyone's personal work must consist of struggling against this chief fault. This explains why there can be no general rules of work, and why all systems attempting to evolve such rules either lead to nothing, or else cause harm. How can there be general rules? When what is useful for one is harmful for another, one talks too much and must learn to keep silent. Another is silent when they ought to talk and must learn to talk. So it is always and in everything. General rules for the work of groups refer to everyone. Personal directions, however, can only ever be individual. In this regard, one cannot find their own chief feature, their chief fault by themselves. This is practically a law. The teacher has to point out the feature to them, and show how to fight against it. No one else but a teacher can do this. The study of our chief fault and the struggle against it constitutes, as it were, each person's individual path. However, the aim must be the same for all. This aim is the realization of one's nothingness. Only when one has truly and sincerely arrived at the conviction of their own helplessness and nothingness, only when they feel it constantly, will they be ready for the next and much more difficult stages of the work. All that has been shared refers to real groups connected with real concrete work that in its turn is connected with what has been called the fourth way. However, there are many imitation ways, imitation groups and imitation work that cannot even be called dark magic. Questions have often been asked as to what is dark magic, and the answer to this is simply there is neither red, green nor yellow magic. There is mechanics, which is what happens, and then there is doing. Doing is magical, and doing can only be of one kind. There cannot be two kinds of doing. However, there can be a falsification, an imitation of the outward appearance of doing, busyness that cannot give any objective result but deceives naive people and produces in them faith, infatuation, enthusiasm and even fanaticism. This is why in true work, in true doing, encouraging infatuation in people is not permitted. What many people call dark magic is based upon infatuation, cult personalities and preying upon human weakness. Dark magic does not in any way mean the magic of evil. Earlier it was noted that no one ever does anything for the sake of evil or in the interests of evil. Everyone does everything in the interests of good, but simply as they understand it. In the same way, it is wrong to assert that dark magic must necessarily be egotistical, that in dark magic one strives after some result for themselves. This is quite wrong. Dark magic may be quite altruistic, may strive after the good of humanity or even after the salvation of humanity from real or imaginary evils. However, what can be called dark magic always has one definite characteristic, the tendency to use people for some, even the noblest of aims without their knowledge and without their clear understanding. Either by producing in them faith and infatuation, or by acting upon them through fear. In this regard, however, it must be remembered that a magician, whether good or evil, has in any event attended a school. They have learned something and have heard something or know something. They are simply half-educated, someone that has either been turned out of a school or who has themselves left a school, having decided that they already know enough. That they no longer desire to be in subordination and can work independently or even direct the work of others. An example of such was Devadatta, the cousin and brother-in-law of Prince Siddhartha. All work of this kind can produce only subjective results, that is to say, it can only increase deception and increase sleep instead of decreasing them. Nevertheless, something can be learned from a magician, although in the wrong way. They can sometimes, accidentally even tell the truth, which is why it is said that there are many things worse than dark magic, such as various occult and theosophical societies and groups. Not only have their teachers never been to a school, but they have never even met with anyone that has even been near a school. Their work simply consists of aping. Imitation work, however, of this kind does give a great deal of self-satisfaction. One feels themselves to be teacher, then others feel that they are pupils, and everyone is satisfied. No realization of one's nothingness can be attained there, and if people affirm that they have it, it is all illusion and self-deception, if not just plain deceit. On the contrary, instead of realizing their own nothingness, the members of such circles acquire a realization of their own self-importance, and a growth of false personality. At first it is difficult to verify whether the work is right or wrong, whether the directions received are correct or incorrect. The theoretical part of work may prove useful in this respect because a person can judge more easily from this aspect of it. They know what they know, and what they do not know. They know what can be learned by ordinary means, and what cannot. If they learn something new, something that cannot be learned in the ordinary way from books and so on, then this to a certain degree is indicative of the other, that the practical side may also be right. However, this of course is far from being a full guarantee, because here also mistakes are possible. All occult and spiritualist societies or circles assert that they possess a new knowledge, and there are those that believe it. In proper organized groups no faith is required. What is required is simply a little trust, and even then only for a short period of time, for the sooner one begins to verify all that they hear, the better it is for them. The struggle against the false I, against one's chief feature or chief fault, is the most important part of this work, and must proceed in deeds and not words. For this purpose the teacher gives each person definite tasks that require, in order to carry them out, the conquest of their chief feature. When one carries out these tasks, then they struggle with themselves and works on themselves. If they avoid the tasks and try instead not to carry them out, it means that either they do not want to, or that they are not yet ready to work. As a rule, only very easy tasks are given at the beginning, that the teacher does not even call tasks, and does not say much but gives them in the form of hints. If they see that they are understood, that the tasks are carried out, then they pass on to more and more difficult ones. More difficult tasks, although they are only subjectively difficult, are called barriers. The peculiarity of barriers consists of the fact that having surmounted a serious barrier, one can no longer return to ordinary sleep, to ordinary life. If after having passed the first barrier they feel afraid of those that lie ahead, and do not wish to go on, then they stop, arrested in development between two barriers, and are unable to move either backward or forward. This is the worst thing that can happen to anyone. Therefore the teacher is usually careful in the choice of tasks and barriers. In other words, they take the risk of giving definite tasks requiring the conquest of inner barriers, only to those people that have already shown themselves to be sufficiently strong-willed when working on smaller barriers. It often happens that having stopped before some barrier, usually the smallest and most simple, people turn against the work, against the teacher, and even against other members of the group, accusing them of the very thing that is becoming revealed in themselves. This is reflection, the man in the mirror. Sometimes they repent later and blame themselves, then they again blame others, then they repent once more, and so on. However, there is nothing that shows up a person better than their attitude towards the work and the teacher after they have left it. Sometimes such tests are arranged intentionally. A person is placed in such a position that they are obliged to leave, and fully justified in having a grievance against either the teacher or against some or other person, then they are watched to see how they will behave. A decent person will behave decently, even if they think they have been treated unjustly or wrongly. However, many people in such circumstances show the side of their true nature, which they would otherwise have never shown. At times this is a necessary means to expose an individual's character, for so long as you are good to them, then they are good to you, but what will they be like if you scratch them a little? This is, however, not the point. The main point is our own personal attitude, our own valuation of the ideas that we receive or have received, and the keeping or losing of this valuation. A person may think for a long time, and quite sincerely, that they want to work and even make great effort in doing so, then they may turn around and throw up everything, even going against the work itself. Justifying their actions and inventing various fabrications, or deliberately ascribing the wrong meaning to what they have heard, and so on. It's important to them that they create the narrative, and whomsoever retains the artifacts tells the story, as these become the anchors to which they tether reality. What then happens to such a person? The answer is nothing. What could happen to such an individual? They are their own worst enemy, their own worst punishment, and what could possibly be worse than that? They follow themselves wherever they go in life, wherever they find themselves, there they are. It's impossible to describe in full the way work in a group is conducted, and one must simply go through it. All that has been said is only a hint, the true meaning of which can be revealed to those who go on with the work and learn from personal experience what barriers mean, and what difficulty they represent. Speaking in general, however, the most difficult barrier is the conquest of lying, which in turn obscures a need for attention or attention deficit. One lies so much and so constantly both to themselves and to others that they cease to notice it. Nevertheless, lying must be conquered, and the first effort required of us is to conquer lying with relation to the teacher. A person must either decide immediately to tell nothing but the truth in their work or give up the whole thing entirely. It must be realized that the teacher takes upon themselves a very difficult task, the cleaning and the repair of human machines. They of course accept only those machines that are within their power to mend. If something essential is broken, or put out of order in the machine, then they refuse to take it. However, even those machines that are acceptable, which by their nature can be cleaned, become quite hopeless if they begin to tell lies. A lie to the teacher, concealment of any kind, such as something that another has asked to be kept secret, or something the individual themselves has said to another, at once puts an end to the work of that person, particularly if they have previously made an effort. In this lies something significant that has to be borne in mind. Every effort a person makes increases the demands placed upon them. For as long as we have not made any serious effort, then the demands made are very small. However, our effort immediately increases the demands made upon us, and the greater the effort, the greater the new demands shall become. At this stage, people often make a common mistake. They think that the effort they have previously made, their former merit so to speak or good karma, gives them some kind of right or advantage, it's banked in their favor and therefore diminishes the demands placed upon them, constituting as it were, an excuse slip, a get-out-of-jail-free card should they not work, or afterward do something wrong. This is profoundly false, as nothing that a person did yesterday can excuse them today. Quite the reverse, in fact. If a person did nothing yesterday, then no demands will be made of them today. If on the other hand they did anything at all yesterday, then it means that they must do more today. This nonetheless does not mean that it is better to do nothing every day, as whoever does nothing shall receive nothing in return, and there lies the balance of true magic.